समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया.
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
अब समझा.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Europe needs to be able to stand on our own feet and defend ourselves, and that requires more investment, needless to say. And we will also spend our presidency to promote that agenda. At the same time, that goes hand in hand with a very strong support for Ukraine. If Ukraine is not safe, then Europe will not be safe.
When I talk about this FTA from the Danish perspective, do you think this is also going to unlock climate financing opportunities in India?
Indians are the fastest growing migrant group in Denmark at the moment.
Okay.
And a fun fact there is that the average Indian person in Denmark now earns more than the average Dane.
We keep saying in India that getting investment, especially foreign investment, has been a challenge. FDI has not been coming the way we expected. We could not really make use or we could not capitalize on the China Plus One diversification.
So many Danish companies who manufacture, they do it to the Indian market. And I think that's really interesting. And that shows a strength that India has that probably nobody else has in the region.
The main problem with Europe building more competitiveness is not the realization, perhaps it's over-regulation. So do you also think that during your presidency you're going to be taking that up in ways that can have tangible outcomes, because that's what perhaps is Europe's problem? So welcome to the World View with Swasti, and today I take you to yet another part of the world, to a country that is very important for India's development, especially in the field of sustainability and green and clean energy. Now, I'm very pleased to be joined by His Excellency Ambassador Rasmus Kristensen, who is the ambassador of Denmark to India. You know, Ambassador Kristensen is no stranger to this region. He has served at China, ASEAN, Indonesia, so he knows the region pretty well. He is also an expert of climate policy. So welcome to the Print World View with Swasti, Ambassador. What a pleasure to have you. It's an honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
So you've just been posted to India this year, February 2025. And I think the two sides, I think when we say Denmark, the first obvious things that comes to everybody's mind is the sustainability agenda and the green strategic partnership. And this kind of rings a bell, Your Excellency, because usually, I mean, India has signed so many strategic partnerships. But when we say a green strategic partnership that the two leaders decided in 2020, if I'm not wrong, and then there's an action plan for the next 5 years. And right now we are in the middle of that action plan. So first, your views on what is it all about?
Well, as you rightly point out, I think India has perhaps realized that although Denmark is a small country, in Europe we still have a lot to offer, especially when it comes to sustainability. And that is why we dubbed our strategic partnership a green strategic partnership. And I think that nicely encapsulates what we cooperate on. So it's on water, it's on energy, it's on food and agriculture, but also on science and technology, healthcare, but all with a sort of a sustainability angle.
Right.
So that defines the partnership. Then you could ask, what does that actually mean in practice?
Right.
And some of it is very concrete. Let's take energy as an example. In Denmark, we have many years of experience developing offshore wind, for example. India, interestingly, along with Denmark, is actually also one of the front runners when it comes to wind power. Wind has been part of the energy mix here in India for many, many years, but offshore is still a new thing. And there perhaps we have some experiences we can share. Some of it is also even more technical in the sense that we help sort of devise grid codes. How do you integrate large amounts of renewable energy from wind and solar into your grid? Again, a very technical discipline, but something where hopefully we can play a very small role in the otherwise very impressive trajectory that India is on when it comes to renewables. Water could be another good example of what we do in practice. So there we are, for example, helping India to reduce leakage from its water system, from the pipes. In Denmark, that leakage is down to just a few percent. In India, in many cities, it's up to 40%. And of course, that matters quite a bit in a country that is already water stressed. I mean, you have 17% of the world's population, but only 3% of the world's water resources. So that's a challenge for India. And again, hopefully we have a few experiences we can share to the benefit of Indian development.
No, that's interesting because often we sometimes struggle because what does it really mean to have a green strategic partnership? And thank you for sort of underscoring in practice what that would mean. But also, if you look at the export-import data, for example, I mean, Denmark and India have had a trade, and robust trade, but it's still about under $2 billion. And yet, until about a year ago, we had a trade surplus with you, and now you have a trade surplus. It's marginal, but more or less the trade is equal. But having said that, what do you see? How would you suggest that we can sort of expand on our trading relationship as well? Because I know investment is also a huge part. We'll come to that later. But just about the trade, bilateral trade.
No, first, and I know this is a bit of a technical issue, but actually sometimes the numbers get a little distorted.
Okay.
And let me explain why that is. So Denmark is a small open economy, but we have a number of absolute world-class companies that has operations all over the world. So it's true that if you simply look at goods that comes straight from Denmark to India, then perhaps the number is still modest, but I think that partially is a reflection of the fact that many of the Danish companies that trade with India, the goods could come from anywhere else in the world.
Okay.
Let's say they manufacture in South Africa, and then that goes from South Africa to India, but it's still a Danish company that does it. So actually the amount of trade is larger. And if you look at the investment figures, that distortion is even bigger. Because if you just look at the, and we'll come back to it, I know, but the investment figures itself also looks like they're relatively low. But again, that's typically because the investments financially is channeled through places like Singapore, the Gulf states, or Luxembourg, and then it looks like the investment comes from there. But actually, they are Danish investments. So my impression is that the trade figures are going up. That's what we hear from the Danish companies. But still, of course, because of tariffs and many other challenges, I think the number could be higher. And I think the game changer looking forward will be the future free trade agreement between the European Union and India that we are currently negotiating, hoping that it can be concluded by the end of the year as agreed between the Commission President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Modi. If that happens, and I'm sure it will, that will be a game changer also for the bilateral trade between Denmark and India.
You mentioned the free trade agreement, and of course we know that out of the 23 chapters, we have finally reached agreement up to 7, and those are more complicated, and it'll take its own time, but I'm also as hopeful as you are that we should be able to conclude it before the end of this year. But having said that, when I talk about this FTA from the Danish perspective, do you think this is also going to unlock climate financing opportunities in India?
Yes, it could in many ways, because again it will promote investments from Europe to India, and many of those investments will go into clean tech, the green sectors. So in that sense, you can say that it unlocks climate finance as well. But that being said, if you purely look at investments in or climate finance, if you like, India is already a very attractive place to invest. In Denmark, we have our biggest sovereign fund. It's called Impact Fund Denmark. And if you look at their global portfolio, India is actually a country where they have invested the most. So this is Danish funding going straight into typically green projects in India. As an example, last year they concluded a big agreement on investment projects, utility-scale solar project in Rajasthan. So this is just one among the many investments that they have done here in India. So that is a direct example of climate finance coming to India.
Right, and even before the FTA is concluded, we know that there are about 400 Danish companies in different capacities that have invested, that have presence in India. So how does this really work? I mean, how has been their experience? Because we keep saying in India that getting investment, especially foreign investment, has been a challenge. FDI has not been coming the way we expected. We could not really make we could not capitalize on the China plus one diversification. So that's like one perception. But when I look at the data from Denmark, I see 400 companies here. And by what you just explained, I also gather that the impression seems to be very favorable. So what has been the Danish experience when it comes to investing in India?
I think overall Danish companies have had a good experience investing in India, and certainly the numbers are increasing, and I think they will keep increasing in the future. As you say, we have a large number of companies with a presence here in India. Danish companies employ well over 100,000 people in India. And it's within a range of sectors from shipping, logistics, maritime to healthcare to manufacturing, and many Danish companies also establish capability centers here in India to tap into the enormous talent, engineering skills that you can find here in India. And I think we have surveyed also all the Danish companies here and asked them, so do you expect to invest more in the years to come? And more than 70% answers in the affirmative. So I think that's actually testament to a bullish view on India and the Indian market. And I think what India has going for it, if you compare to many other countries in the region, is that one thing is that you can be here and manufacture, for example, with the view to exports, so the China plus one, as you mentioned, and perhaps that part of the equation will be it would help a lot if, for example, India has a free trade agreement with the EU and other key partners in the West, because then the whole export-driven part of the equation becomes more attractive. But what is really interesting about India is not just that you can be here and manufacture for exports, but it's interesting because the Indian market itself is getting important for Danish companies. So many Danish companies who manufacture, they do it to the Indian market, and I think that's really interesting, and that shows a strength that India has that probably nobody else has in the region.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And I think what the part of conversation that we also need to have is about the presence of Indian companies in Denmark. So would you like to tell a little bit about that? What is it that they are doing, and how can we also have more Indian presence in your region?
No, I'm super happy that this is not a one-way street. On the contrary, we have a lot of Indian companies also investing in Denmark at the moment. And a lot of it is in sort of high-tech industries. It's IT, digital services, engineering. So you have companies like Infosys, Tata Consulting. You have L&T with quite sizable operations in Denmark. Just this week, it was announced that Tata Consulting Services had won a huge order from what is in fact Scandinavia's largest insurance company, which is Danish. So I think that's just testament again to the fact that India has also discovered the opportunities in Denmark, both the Danish market itself, but also because Denmark in many ways is a hub and a bridge to the other Nordic countries. Right. So that in that sense, it makes a lot of sense for them to establish themselves in Copenhagen. So I think we will see more of that in the years to come. And the side effect of that is that actually Indians are the fastest growing migrant group in Denmark at the moment.
Okay.
And a fun fact there is that the average Indian person in Denmark now earns more than the average Dane. So I think they're doing very well.
Yeah. In many other parts of the world, this has become a bone of contention. Okay, I hope that doesn't become so in Denmark.
Not in Denmark.
Not in Denmark, all right. I think Indians, yes, and I think a lot of viewers should also know that there is a presence of more than 20,000 Indians who live in Denmark, which is quite a sizable number because, you probably didn't expect those figures. Now, well, thanks for that elaboration. But now also, come back to the Indian side. And recently, there's also been some developments on the maritime cooperation, front. So could you tell us a little bit about that? How is Denmark playing a role in India's maritime modernization or capabilities, or what exactly is that?
Well, first and foremost, India is a rising power when it comes to the whole maritime industry, both in terms of port infrastructure, as a shipping destination, shipbuilding, ship recycling. All this will expand in the years to come, and I think in that journey, Denmark is a natural partner. We are still, despite being a small country, one of the heavyweights when it comes to shipping and maritime industries worldwide. We have companies like Maersk, which is one of the world's largest shipping
Yes.
companies, already heavily invested here, both in port and terminal infrastructure, but also increasingly in other areas. So we'll see more of that in the years to come. And then if you look at the future, I think one of the key challenges for the maritime sector worldwide is how to decarbonize, how to become more clean. And a lot of that has to do with clean fuels. So basically changing the fuels that are used in the big container ships. And there we are cooperating with India. We have a center of excellence on sort of green shipping, together with the Ministry of Shipping, Ports and Infrastructure. And currently, for example, to give you a concrete example, what does that mean? We have started a project on green corridors, so basically green shipping corridors. So what is the most cost-efficient way to establish such green corridors between India and the rest of the world?
Yeah.
And the key point here is that India could be a very attractive place to produce some of these clean fuels, whether it's methanol, ammonium, or hydrogen. And of course, the off-takers for that would, among others, be some of the big Danish shipping companies.
Right. Interesting to know that. And also, since Denmark is, India, of course, has excellent bilateral ties with Denmark, but India also has excellent ties with this little plurilateral grouping within your region, within Europe, which is known as the Nordic Council, which is a group of about 5 Nordic countries with you and your neighboring states. And so how does that engagement differ from what you do bilaterally with India? So how does Denmark sort of cooperate through the Nordic Council? Does the mandate change a little bit, or what is it? Does it complement?
It's perhaps not so much the Nordic Council, which is a very specific institution, mainly focusing on the internal cooperation in the Nordics. But it's very true that I think the Nordic countries as a whole is a quite good platform for cooperating with India. For a number of years now, we have had regular summits between the Nordic prime ministers or heads of government and Prime Minister Modi, and it's I think.
Would you also mind telling which all countries actually come in the Nordic grouping?
So in that Nordic group, it would be Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and then Finland and Iceland, and I think. Maybe that also reflects the fact that when India looks at the Nordics, of course, it sees quite similar countries, societies, but also with similar, perhaps, value propositions when it comes to the cooperation with India. I mean, we are highly digitized, high-tech countries in that sense, and again, as you say, focusing all of us on sustainability, sustainable development. So we would have a lot in those spaces to offer India. And we are, although combined, the 5 countries are only 20 something million people. We're still the world's 10th biggest economy.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes a little bit forgotten when you talk about the small Nordic countries, but combined, we're the world's 10th biggest economy. And of course, for that reason, it should be of interest to India. Now, in practice, what does that mean? Let me give you an example. I was in Copenhagen last week, where we organized the second India-Nordic Startup Summit. Okay. So we had a large number of startups coming here from India, going to Copenhagen, meeting with Nordic counterparts, so other Nordic startups, but also investors, venture capital funds, that kind of thing, to see if we can build a more coherent bridge on the startup side, the tech side, between India and the Nordic countries. And I think that's, again, an example of where it also makes sense for us in the Nordics to go together and offer sort of a joint value proposition to India.
So that was a brilliant example of actually how to build more convergence between, say, India, that is in the economy of scale, with the Nordics, that are economies of skill. So that's an excellent example, and thank you for that. And but that's not all. Denmark has also the responsibility as the president of the Council of the European Union, and this is a presidency that you've taken from Poland, that chaired it for the first 6 months of 2025, and now you're going to be chairing it for the next 6 months of 2025. So what are your responsibilities, there? Because the Polish presidency, of course, I think one of the key takeaways, especially when we look at it from India, one of the key takeaways of the Polish presidency was sort of, putting security as a centerpiece because of obvious reasons of what is happening in Europe. But when I look at the Danish agenda, I think you've added 2 more verticals there, which is competitiveness and sustainability. So could you just also tell a little bit about how are you looking at the 6 months now?
Yeah, we took over the presidency, the rotating presidency of the European Council on July 1st, and it will last to the end of the year. And as you rightly point out, security is still front and center of our efforts for the next 6 months, because Europe is at where it is. We need to invest more in our own security. So that is still very important. But as you rightly point out, on top of that, we cannot just talk about security as political security. We also need to talk about economic security, and in that sense, competitiveness is absolutely key. The former ECB president Mario Draghi came with a report last year on European competitiveness that was in many ways sobering. I would say for many European leaders and the European institutions, in the sense that it showed that Europe has a lot of homework to do to boost its competitiveness, and has in some ways fallen behind, let's say, countries like China and the US. So Europe needs to do more to improve its competitiveness, and that will also play a very important part of the Danish presidency. Whether it's deregulation, making it easier to do business in Europe, whether it is ensuring that the single market that we have in Europe, where you can freely trade among all the European countries, is functioning better, or whether it's more investments into science, technology, and some of the cutting edge industries that will define sort of the global competitiveness race in the years to come. Finally, as part of that, it's important for us that we don't forget the green transition. Europe has been at the forefront of global decarbonization efforts, and we will continue to do that. And actually, we think in Denmark that the green transition, competitiveness, and security go hand in hand.
Okay.
Because the more we develop our own indigenous renewable energy resources in Europe, the less we are dependent on others for importing our energy, and therefore the more resilient we become. At the same time, many of these technologies are also at the center of global competitiveness in the years to come. So we want to make sure that those technologies are still developed and deployed in Europe by Europeans.
Right, but the way I understand this, that the main problem with Europe building more competitiveness is not the realization, perhaps it's over-regulation. So do you also think that during your presidency, you're going to be taking that up in ways that can have tangible outcomes? Because that's what perhaps is Europe's problem. It's 27 member states and so much regulation. So how do you then build competitiveness and sustainability and all of that, and all the security responsibilities with so much regulation?
No, I think we are very supportive of the Commission's efforts in deregulating and ensuring again that it becomes easier to be a European company. I think especially it relates to some of the reporting requirements that can be quite burdensome for European companies, and the Commission President has already outlined a roadmap for that. And as presidency, what we can do is to lend our weight behind and support it, and make sure that, as you say, all the member states sort of go hand in hand and try to make this happen for real. Let me finally add, when it comes to competitiveness, it also, I mean, we talked a lot about what Europe needs to do in Europe, whether it's deregulation or making the single market work better. But there's also an external dimension, which relates to diversifying our trade agreements, our trade relations. And in that context, I think the relationship with India becomes very important. Back to what we discussed in the beginning on actually finalizing this free trade agreement with India, which will be, as we see it, a win-win, not just for Europe, but also for India. Two very complementary economies in many ways.
Yeah. Well, I understand that very well, that complication. But that also, let me just understand a little bit from you. What is the role that Denmark is playing in Europe's security modernization, if you would like to call it, security resilience or militarization, whichever way you want to put it? Because Denmark is also doing a lot for Ukraine and Denmark. So, I mean, could you just highlight a little bit of what is your country's role in European security order?
But Denmark is a long-term member both of NATO, of course, but also of the European Union. And we are fully supportive of the new ambition or target of spending 5% of our GDP on defense. So that's a NATO commitment. And at the same time, on the EU side, the Commission's Rearm Europe plan that also entails boosting the European defense industry. We need to do more, and I think that's very clear to everyone. But perhaps for my country in particular, Europe needs to be able to stand on our own feet and defend ourselves. And that requires more investment, needless to say. And we will also spend our presidency to promote that agenda. At the same time, that goes hand in hand with a very strong support for Ukraine. If Ukraine is not safe, then Europe will not be safe.
Right. And since we're talking about defense, of course, Denmark is not known for a heavy defense industry like many of your other neighbors like Germany or France or, even Sweden. What Denmark really does is sort of niche technologies and radars and stuff. But I have to talk to you about this dimension of potential defense cooperation between India and Denmark, because that is a vertical which has been missing all these years. So while we have major achievements in the area of green strategic partnership, when it comes to defense, you don't really see that kind of outcome or investment. So if you can talk to us a little bit about how can we sort of set aside the past missteps and have some sort of a potential cooperation or defense, not necessarily big platforms, but also a lot of niche technology. I mean, today India is also looking at becoming a defense exporter, and we are exporting to countries like France and US in their secondary equipment, dual use. Do you see any such cooperation potential between Denmark and India?
Well, First, I don't think there has been any particular missteps in the past. I think it's more a question of that defense cooperation has not been an issue that has much been discussed at the government level. Whereas, in fact, what has happened in sort of a little bit perhaps unknown is that a lot of the Danish companies, as you rightly point out, we don't produce the big platforms like fighter jets or anything like that, but we do have a lot of niche technologies, and those companies are already doing quite well here in India, whether it's radar technologies or components for example, the Indian Navy. Again, back to the fact that we are a big maritime nation, so whether it's dual use or actual military applications, we have a lot to offer the Indian Navy, but also other branches of the Indian military. And I think what we've seen in recent years is actually those numbers are going up, sort of more or less by themselves. Of course, we would be happy also to explore the opportunity of Indian companies exporting to Denmark and Europe at a point when Europe is rearming and will need to invest a lot in its security. So there should be obvious opportunities for further cooperation in those areas.
So, by the way, does Denmark has a defense attaché or a military attaché posted in India?
Currently, we do not have a military attaché posted at the embassy here, but our political section is, of course, in dialogue with Indian counterparts also on these aspects.
Right. So that's a lot of ground to cover, actually. So a lot of work for the two countries to do. And also, since you've been posted to India, you've just come here a few months ago, and of course, it's such a busy time in the world for all of us. But then, what are going to be your focus areas as ambassador to India to develop this bilateral relationship, which is a pretty multidimensional one? It's not just green energy, but it's, as we discussed today, it's multidimensional. What are going to be your focus areas?
No, I think first of all we have a very strong foundation today with the Green Strategic Partnership, cooperation as you outlined in a number of areas. So in many ways the partnership is already comprehensive. So I think my priority would be twofold. First of all, to double down on some of the most promising cooperation areas within sustainability, and here I would probably point to water, energy, and the maritime sector, where I think there is even bigger potential to be realized in the years to come. The two countries will have so much to offer each other, so we will double down on that, while at the same time, of course, keep cooperating in many of the other areas that I mentioned. So that's number one. The second thing will be to expand the cooperation to new areas. And I think there the most promising would be areas such as emerging tech, whether it's artificial intelligence, space technology, that kind of thing. Again, areas where Denmark also have a lot of niche technologies that are nonetheless super important, going forward in some of those sectors.
Right. And are you also developing more mechanisms for better people-to-people contact? Because just as we have so many Indians that live in Denmark, we probably don't have as many Danish people who are living in India. So maybe people-to-people contact could also be one vertical. But just as your concluding thoughts on, so far this is we've only been talking about the good picture. So what do you think are the challenges as well?
I don't think there are any sort of massive challenges, as a matter of fact. But of course, whether we if you ask, for example, Danish companies, as I said, they are global in their orientation. So when they look out from Denmark, for them, it's all about where do they get the best framework conditions for manufacturing, exporting, investing, and they are very good at benchmarking countries against each other. So I think it's part of my job to, of course, increase awareness about the opportunities here in India, but of course also have a dialogue with Indian government officials about, what can we do to further make India attractive in terms of getting Danish investors here. And some of them are just, very technical low-hanging fruits, but nonetheless important.
Thank you so much. I so totally agree with you that this is a very important partnership. This is going to be the game changer in many ways, and sort of taking India into that next generation green development. You mentioned the shipping corridors, etc. So on that note, let me thank you for a very enriching discussion on not just the bilateral ties between Denmark and India, but also where Denmark is in Europe, in the Nordic Council, and particularly what is your outlook, in general. So that was His Excellency Ambassador Rasmus Kristensen, Ambassador of Denmark to India, for the Print Worldview with Swasti. You stay tuned.